In the news tonight, Palestinians clash with Israeli soldiers in the West Bank after occupation troops tried to dismantle an encampment set up in the town of Burin to protest Israeli settlement building. Head of the Syrian opposition coalition holds separate meetings with U.S. and Russian officials in Munich and says an invitation to visit Moscow could pave the way for a solution to the crisis in Syria. And the United States says it is ready to hold direct talks with Iran if the Iranian leadership is serious in negotiations on its nuclear program. Good evening and welcome to a new edition of the news. Here are the details. Prime Minister Abdullah Mansour asked the Minister of Municipal Affairs to start preparations for municipal elections to begin no later than mid-September. Last December, the Cabinet decided to postpone municipal elections for 6 months as of March 14, 2013. In November, the Higher Judicial Council's Law Interpretation Bureau ruled that municipal elections could be delayed again. The law only specified the delay for 6 months without limiting the number of delays. President of the Independent Elections Commission, Abdelilah Al-Khatib, said the Commission's partnership with civil society institutions and its interactive relationship with the media must continue beyond parliamentary elections. Al-Khatib was speaking at a meeting of the Commission's board members with local and international observers to listen to their views on the election process. He said the Commission seeks to establish an institutional presence and will work towards improving all procedures relating to the election through training programs and capacity building of staff members. He said the IEC has done its utmost to put in place best election practices, making use of an amended election law, and urged for cooperation to build an election culture. Minister of Health Abdul Latif Urekat denied reports of training citizens on dealing with emergencies arising from the use of chemical weapons. Urekat stressed that his ministry did not state or even hint at such baseless claims and urged the media to be more accurate in its reports. Social media websites have recently reported that the Ministry of Health has conducted an awareness program for citizens in the northern region to help them deal with any risk of chemical weapons that could be used by Syrian forces. In the West Bank, Palestinians clashed with Israeli soldiers when occupation troops tried to dismantle an encampment that was set up in the town of Burin to protest Israeli settlement building. The Al-Manatir camp, a group of 4 tents and 5 metal shacks built in a Palestinian olive grove near Nablus, is the 4th protest encampment that Palestinians have tried to establish in recent weeks. Occupation forces fired tear gas and stun grenades the crowds before removing about a dozen tents and shelters and arrested at least 5 Palestinians. Some Israeli settlers threw stones at Palestinians. By building encampments, Palestinians are imitating the hardline Jewish settlers who have established a series of outposts throughout the West Bank. The UN peace envoy to Syria, Lakhdar Brahimi, held talks with U.S. Vice President Joe Biden at a security conference in Germany. It was a door meeting between Brahimi and Biden on the sidelines of the annual security conference in Munich. Yesterday, at an overnight session, Brahimi said a UN Security Council resolution is necessary to end the 22-month-long civil conflict in Syria. While in Munich, Biden also met with the head Syria's main opposition coalition, Mu'adh al-Khatib, to discuss U.S. concerns about the Syrian conflict. It was the highest-level U.S. meeting with the Syrian opposition, in which Biden discussed U.S. humanitarian assistance and political and non-lethal support for Syria. Biden regretted the lack of international agreement, in particular between Washington and Moscow, on how to resolve Syria's crisis. Separately, Al-Khatib met with the Russian foreign minister, who invited him to visit Moscow. He told reporters in Munich that the invitation is a breakthrough in relations that could pave the way for a solution to the Syrian crisis. He was also to meet with Iranian Foreign Minister Ali Akbar Salehi, who was attending the Munich Security Conference. Meanwhile, the Syrian government described as progress that the Syrian opposition leader has agreed to find a political solution for the country's crisis. This came during a meeting between Iran's National Security Council Secretary Saeed Jalili and the Syrian Prime Minister in Damascus. Jalili is on a several-day visit to discuss the latest developments in the crisis and is due to meet with President Bashar al-Assad and the Foreign Minister. On Wednesday, Mu'adh al-Khatib said he was ready to hold talks with representatives of President Bashar al-Assad outside Syria if authorities released tens of thousands of detainees.
ما يريده فئات الشعب الحكومة.
بالمبدأ لسنا
We are not against the concept of anyone to be convinced that the solution is a political one, but they have to be really convinced and not to only repeat the regional and international atmosphere which arrived finally to adapt with Syrian fact. The acceptance of the political solution is progress. But the most important are the concepts of the political solution. We accept the dialogue, not the negotiation, because there is a big difference between the two jargons.
On the ground in Syria, government forces and rebels clashed again in several areas of the country, including around Damascus. According to activists and the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, there were no reports of casualties. The U.S. Vice President conveyed his country's readiness to hold direct talks with Iran if it was serious about negotiations. Speaking in Munich on the sidelines of the Security Conference, Biden said Iran, now facing the most robust sanctions in history, need not sentence its people to economic deprivation and international isolation. He said there is still time and space for diplomacy when the Iranian leadership is ready to negotiate, and that the ball is in the Iranian government's. Today, talks on Iran's nuclear program have been between Tehran and the EU's top diplomat representing 6 world powers, including Washington. But analysts are suggesting that with his re-election behind him, President Barack Obama might have more freedom to take on direct negotiations with Iran.
We have made it clear at the outset that we would be prepared to meet bilaterally with the Iranian leadership. We would not make it a secret that we were doing that. We would let our partners know if that occasion presented itself. That offer stands, but it must be real and tangible. And there has to be an agenda that they're prepared to speak to. We are not just prepared to do it for the exercise.
Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov told the Munich Security Conference that he strongly supports Biden's offer for renewed talks with Iran about its nuclear program. However, he noted that Iran must be convinced that the talks are not aimed at changing Tehran's regime. And while Biden conveyed his country's readiness to hold direct talks with Iran, Iran unveiled what it said is a new domestically built fighter jet. President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad said at a ceremony in Tehran that the Qahir 313 demonstrated Iran's growing self-reliance in military technology. In remarks on state television, he added that the new fighter carries a message of peace, friendship, and brotherhood, noting that Iran's military achievements do not pose a threat to anyone.
Military achievements do not pose a threat to anyone. They're not aimed at abusing the rights of others.
And over to the unrest in Egypt, and riot police are reported to regained control of the area near the presidential palace following night clashes with right-wing protesters calling for President Mohamed Morsi to step down. Yesterday's clashes had left 1 protester dead and 100. A Turkish leftist group claimed responsibility for yesterday's suicide bomb attack on the U.S. Embassy in Ankara and accused Washington of using Turkey as its. In a statement posted on the internet, the Turkish leftist group Revolutionary People's Liberation Party Front, which is listed as a terrorist organization by the United States and Turkey, said it had carried the attack and warned Turkish Prime Minister Tayyip Erdogan he is too a target. The suicide bomber and Turkish security guard were killed in the attack. According to the Interior Ministry, the attacker had served time in jail on domestic terrorism charges in Turkey in the past, re-entered the country using false documents, and is wanted by the authorities. French President François Hollande, on a visit to Mali, stopped in the desert town of Timbuktu in a show of support to French troops deployed in the African country. He told the troops that helped oust Al-Qaeda allied fighters from Mali's main northern towns that he is proud of their work. Here's a story.
Inspecting the damage in Timbuktu, French President François Hollande visits a library holding priceless manuscripts, many torched by Islamist rebels as they fled the ancient town. Hollande is in Mali for a one-day visit with key ministers to support French troops helping to fight Islamist rebels in the country. The rebels destroyed up to 2,000 of some 300,000 priceless manuscripts held in the ancient city, claiming they were against Islamic law. Amid heavy security, Hollande was also given a tour of the city's ancient Grand Mosque, built from mud bricks and wooden beams. The French military operation, which has 3,500 soldiers supporting Mali forces, has so far forced rebels to retreat from many key northern towns. Hollande said France was supporting the Malian army and would continue to do so within the framework of the United Nations until Mali regained complete territorial integrity. Earlier, Hollande was gifted a camel on his arrival at Timbuktu airport as a symbolic gesture of gratitude. He joked he would use it as much as possible for his own transportation. The French president, who was expected to outline the next steps in France's military operation, will also visit the capital Bamako on his whistle-stop tour.
Hollande did go to Timbuktu. He held formal talks in Bamako with his Malayan counterpart, Dioncounda Traoré. John Kerry was officially sworn in as a new U.S. Secretary of State, replacing Hillary Clinton. Kerry took the oath before Supreme Court Associate Justice Elena Kagan in the presence of his wife, who held the Bible, and other family members. Kerry was confirmed for the post by the Senate on Tuesday by an overwhelming majority. He will now serve as the 68th U.S. Secretary of State.
I'm just very, very honored to be sworn in, and I'm very anxious to work. And so I'll be reporting Monday morning at 9 o'clock to do my part.
Shortly before Kerry took the oath, Clinton gave a farewell address to State Department employees. Speaking before a cheering crowd of her colleagues, Clinton thanked everyone for their hard work and urged them to work as hard for Kerry as they did for her. Her departure marks the end of over 3 decades of public service.
I leave thinking of the nearly 70,000 people that I was honored to serve and lead as a huge extended family. And I hope that you will continue to make yourselves, make me, and make our country proud. Thank you all, and God bless you.
London's latest skyscraper, tallest in Western Europe, is now open to the public, offering an impressive panorama even on a rainy day. The Shard, so called because of its resemblance to a gigantic glass splinter, which stands next to London Bridge Station, is 310 meters tall. The building struggled with financing the 2008 credit crunch and could now struggle in renting out the massive space. Here's more.
Stupendous, the highest viewing platform in Europe, if not the world, open.
An enthusiastic reception as London's Mayor Boris Johnson officially opens Europe's tallest building to the public. At the very top, 800 feet up, is the observation deck. It's expected to attract thousands of visitors a year. And on a clear day, it promises to offer spectacular views across the capital, stretching as far as 5 miles.
I think it's a wonderful new attraction for London. What I love about it is that it's not only sensational, there aren't any other building I know of where you can see all the bends in the river. It's like being in a plane.
But at £25 a ticket, it doesn't come cheap.
I think it's well worth it, well worth it. Good for tourism for London. It is worth every penny.
It's amazing, just spectacular, beautiful building, and just
incredible view.
Incredible view.
Below the viewing platform are 30 floors of office space, all still empty. So far, the Shard's biggest tenant is the 5-star Shangri-La Hotel. The restaurant space has also gone, but the 10 penthouse apartments, tipped to cost up to £50 million each, remain unoccupied. Property experts say prices for exclusive properties in central London have risen more than 40% in the last 3 years. The Shard's height has already set records. The next challenge is filling it.
We begin with tennis and the Davis Cup in Vancouver. Canada raced to a 2-love lead over Spain in the World Group first round tie, pushing the 5-time champions to the brink of defeat and moving to within a doubles victory of a maiden win at this level. World number 15 Milos Raonic delivered a feisty match against Alberto Ramos, much of the game. The Canadian beat Ramos, who was making his first Davis Cup debut, 6-7, 6-4, 6-4, 6-4.
Game, set, match.
Frank Dancevic of Canada dropped to his knees and clenched his fists to celebrate the biggest win of his career when a Marcel Granoria's return hit the nets. Dancevic, ranked 161, destroyed world number 30 Spain 6-1, 6-2, 6-2. Two-time Olympic champion Shaun White and in the women's event, Liu Jiayu of China secured victory, which was also the second stop of the U.S. Grand Prix Tour. Liu's winning run earned her 82 points. Ariel Gold was second of her American compatriot, Caitlin Farrington. And finally, for a quick look at the weather forecast, cold and clear conditions continue tonight with southwesterly light winds. A rise in temperature is expected tomorrow, but the weather will remain relatively cold in hilly areas and fair in other parts of the kingdom. Winds will be southeasterly moderate, picking up in the evening hours. The Gulf of Aqaba should expect a relatively cold night, but fair weather tomorrow with northerly moderate to brisk winds and calm seas. The weatherman warns of poor visibility in the early morning hours due to fog, while frost is expected in the late hours of the night and early morning in the Badia and hilly areas. Here now is a look at temperatures forecast for tonight and tomorrow. And to close, his reminder of the day's top stories. Palestinians clash with Israeli soldiers in the West Bank after occupation troops tried to dismantle an encampment set up in the town of Borin to protest Israeli settlement building. Head of the Syrian opposition coalition holds separate meetings with U.S. and Russian officials in Munich and says an invitation to visit Moscow could pave the way for a solution to the crisis in Syria. And the United States says it is ready to hold direct talks with Iran if Iranian leadership is serious about negotiations on its nuclear program. And with this, we come to the end of this edition of the news. I'm Alia Tuqan. Thank you for joining us and have a good night.